Okay, I have 2 o'clock. My name is Trudy Hughes and I work at the system office. And I have invited the wonderful Brian McCullough here today. He's also with the system office and he is going to talk to us about data collection and using the Fin. And so, Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to take my camera off and I'll manage the chat as questions come in. But if you do have a question, Brian's real laid back. So, go ahead and unmute yourself or type it into the chat box, okay? So take it away, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Yes, I'm Brian McCullough. If you don't know me, I'm a business systems analyst is the name of my title. I just say that we kind of short BSA. Really what I do is I help colleges with colleague related things, specifically in the student area. Probably more specifically curriculum, but this topic we're talking about today, I realize spans the entire student area, which would be basic skills and Con Ed in addition to curriculum. So as Dr. Hughes mentioned, I wanted to just briefly touch on using the PHIN, Person Health Information, or FIN screen in colleagues, since colleges are required to use that in order to track their disability and accommodations that they have for students as they go through your respective processes, your college, to request those accommodations. If you don't already know what that screen is, obviously we're going to look at it. I would say that you probably all know this. It's obviously a sensitive screen. There's not a lot of information on there other than that. I think you'll see some places that you can put immunizations, although I don't think most colleges use that. So it's one that really should be secured and really only able to be accessed by the people who need to enter the data. Now, of course, your IT office has access to everything, and you might potentially have some of your institutional research, institutional effectiveness folks have access if they are running reports for you in order to validate data, but that might not even be appropriate depending on your what you would want them to be able to see. So yes, it's definitely something that should be kind of locked down. And then I'm first going to share my screen to look at our service portal, because there is a document in our service portal. It's called Tracking Students with Disabilities. So if you're logged in here, you can get to that pretty quickly just by typing this in and clicking this enter or hitting the search button. And there that document is. I would ask, once you're in here, by the way, you do have to set up an account to get into this, but any college staff, faculty member can do that as long as you have a college email. But what I would ask is that when you get to this, if this is the first time you're looking at this document, before you download it or look at it, is click the subscribe button. That way, whenever there happens to be a change, most likely your IT staff would get that information in a patch if there was some change to like the tables or the different disabilities or accommodations that are approved. But also there should be an update to this document as well. And I'm sure Dr. Hughes would talk about that with you all before this was published, but I still think it's helpful that any of these documents that are in this portal, if you would click subscribe, then whenever a change is made, when this is updated, it will give you that email notification that something has changed, and then you can re-download it, review it, whatever you need to do. The document looks like this. Let me get back to the top. And so I'm not going to go through all of this. You can read this on your own time. It's 20 pages of wonderful reading. Some of it's a little technical. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory and stuff that you probably already know in your profession anyway. But I do want to point out, these are the disabilities that have been approved. So everything that you see on here is what colleges, all 58, should be using. So I'm going to refer to this as the term I'm going to use is a shared table. Now, I say that loosely because technically every college has their own colleague environment they have to manage independently, but we all should be using these same codes and definitions across all 58. And as we think about our process to potentially migrating to a new ERP, something different than colleague, potentially Banner. You may have heard that discussion going on over the last number of years, that project called ERP modernization. there's even more of a chance that these tables like this of data would be shared between all 58. So you really wouldn't have the option of changing this around. You might have some other codes in here in your local colleague that were used in the past before these were standardized. That's okay. You don't want to delete them. You might just add like a DNU. I think there's a little um, note in here about maybe adding like a DNU or a do not use in the description. Don't change the code, because if it is attached to older student accounts or older people records, you wouldn't want to delete that code, and that would cause issues with the database since this is a validation table. So these are the disabilities. These are some previous disabilities that were in the systems that should have that DNU. This is where a disability would get added. But again, that's hopefully all up to date, because that would have been delivered to your IT offices and patches over the last number of years. And then here are the accommodations that goes on a special place called a val table, a validation table. And I do see some questions. I see a question for later. Okay, we'll get to that one later then. And again, some previous accommodations. So I'm going to flip over to the actual PHIN form, as we call it. I'm going to pull myself up. This is just our kind of dummy account. It doesn't have real student data, and we just use it to play around and make sure things work properly. So this is my information. If I were a student and I went to one of your offices, and maybe this is what you would add to me, depending on our discussion. But none of it's really real, except my address and phone number. That's my college, where I'm located, and my office phone number as well. So there's a few things that you could add in here. Obviously, you would add in the disability, and those codes we talked about before would be what you could access in this drop down. You could probably see, though, that we do have some DNUs on some of these, some do not use, because they're things in the past that we're no longer using. So I can't delete them, but at least they're not to be used anymore as you work with students. But when we do, assuming we do move to a new ERP, those things will not convert over. So we wouldn't have to worry about that in the new ERP. It just, for right now, it's there. We just have to kind of ignore it. So you'd select the appropriate disability or disabilities. It's a multi-valued field, so you could add more than one. You'd select an appropriate start date based on whatever your process is. You would not add an end date, though, and I want to make sure that makes sense. The only time an end date, and it says this in the documentation, would be appropriate is if this is like a temporary disability. I guess like if I broke my arm and I needed something, or broke a leg, I guess that could be, I'm guessing, maybe an example of a temporary disability. You can add a type if that makes sense for you all. And then the report field, that could be left blank, because that is simply for, I think, community colleges in Texas use that for something. Then the accommodation would go on this line. And again, you could have multiple combinations. So I added the extended time, the start date of that accommodation. Again, wouldn't add an end date unless that accommodation really is truly supposed to be temporary and not effective for, as long as the students associated with your institution. But even after they graduate, the documentation says that you shouldn't end these even after they graduate. At least not a colleague. Disability, you can associate the disability that is corresponding to the accommodation if you want. I don't think that's a requirement, though, according to the documentation. You'd put in the date that a disability, that accommodation is requested, the status, was it pending, is it granted, is it denied, and then the status date that decision was made by you and or someone in your office. And again, you can add more than one accommodation. Here, as I mentioned before, the immunizations. Colleges might use these, but rarely. I don't think I've ever seen one that really does, at least not robustly. If you keep track, physicals, we don't even have this table filled out. So most of the stuff I wouldn't expect colleges to use. It's really just these two areas up here at the top that where the expectation is that we would use those. So that is all I had to say. Let me look back at the questions. So I have a question for later. This is from, I think it's Maria. Is there a way to tag a student as someone who would need to be evacuated in case of an emergency? Can someone please drop a link? Yes, I could drop a link to the document, although you'll still need to log in to access that link. So If the student would need to be evacuated in case of an emergency. I'm thinking I might need to get back to you on that one, Maria. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm just trying to think of the best way to do it. There are some miscellaneous fields that colleges can sometimes use for various purposes, and maybe you would just take one of those miscellaneous fields and use that specifically for this, because there's probably nothing but thinking right now. I can't think of a space in Colleague that's designated just for that, but there are lots of miscellaneous fields that colleges can use as they see fit for something, as long as it's not being used for some other data point. Let me get that link. Just got to make sure I'm on the right URL so it actually works for you all. And I'm actually going to go, not the actual PDF, but here where you can get to the place where you can access it and subscribe. Okay, let's see. I got an AI assistant. If more than one disability, do we start with MD multiple disabilities? I don't think we have anything in the documentation about that. Dr. Hughes, do you have an opinion about that? If that should be used instead of listing out each disability?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely put multiple disabilities. That is a category that we put in. So that would be just fine. But, for your own records, or it's probably better to list out the specific disabilities if you wanted to keep, accurate data, because multiple disabilities could be a number of things. And Brian, while we're on that topic, I was wondering,
Mhm.
there's only 2 lines for disabilities. If we have students that have complex, how do we add another line or 2?
It will do it automatically. So if I use both two, there's this space up here that I can navigate to the next page. It's not really a page, but it's like a page within the table. So I can add a third, a fourth, and fifth, and so on and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Let's
Hey,
see.
Trudy, can I
Yeah.
follow up for just a second before we move on?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
if I remember correctly, when we first did the updates to the list of disabilities and accommodations, I thought we were directed to start with multiple disability and then list it out, so that I don't know if it was catching something else or not. Otherwise, I don't see the point in putting multiple disability in there at all. If we're not, because I'm listing everything, I'm doing both. I'm putting multiple disability primary and then listing all the disabilities secondary. But it sounds like that's a superfluous situation that I don't need to do.
I don't think there's a specific rule, Heather. I think, I mean, if you want to just use multiple disabilities, but if you want to know exactly what those disabilities are, then I would list them out. I don't recall having that conversation, but, I'm an old woman. I don't recall having that conversation saying that you need to list that multiple disabilities first. But I don't think it would matter unless, saving time, but I don't think it would affect anything in the system.
What I could do, Dr. Hughes, because I think I'm going to have to do this anyway for another college that we've been just speaking about with that's having some issues with seeing the data on our side, is I could check with the developer and see if there's some reason why that was potentially recommended in the past. I'm not aware of it either, because that was all, like as you all as Dr. Hughes knows, at least this document was created before I became the system office. I only been at the system office for 2 years, so I wouldn't know if that was a requirement or not. But I will check with the developer. We can find out for sure.
Thank you, Brian. And then I'll send that out to
reason.
the field. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate that.
Barbara, so no, you do not need to enter Y under the report. So in the documentation, it mentions that field down here as it talks about the fin. So it can tell me exactly what it's for. Skip this field. This field is used for Texas reporting, but not otherwise used by colleagues. So that's not something that our state reporting cares about, but the Texas state reporting processes that Ellucian builds for those colleges would care about it. So not needed for us in North Carolina. Are we supposed to enter a status? Do you mean like the request status? My understanding is yes. Dr. Hughes, do you have a concern with that or a thought
No,
on that?
you do need to put a status on. because we need to know whether or not the accommodation has been approved or is it just pending, so.
Do we use the comments field? What happens to that information? Today, again, you would be the only ones to see that because it's specific to health comments. I do believe, though, just like this data would be converted to a new ERP, I do believe we would convert this data as well. No, we talked about that being a concern, though, because the place that most comments go in Banner was more of a everyone could see them. So I feel like we found a place that was locked down. I just don't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, sorry, that's more information that you all need, but that's something, remind myself I need to go back and check on that. But yes, you all can use these comments. The only person as of date, the only people that could see these are those who have access to the screen. And it's not reported. I would highly doubt they report comments. So it really is just simply for you all and anyone who has access to the screen at the local college. And then Barbara mentioned that how she uses that. So as I understand it, Brittany, the only time that according, unless this is wrong, Dr. Hughes, in the documentation that an accommodation should be ended is when it's temporary. If it's a standard on accommodation or the student's no longer enrolled or graduated, you would not enter an end date. That's what we've specifically spelled out in these notes. And so that's the question Brittany's asking about,
Yeah,
like accommodation for a year.
That's my understanding is you do not put an end date.
And yes, yeah, Maria, I'll think about it some more too. And I will also communicate that back with Dr. Hughes as well, as far as another place that you could put that evacuate a student kind of information so that you could easily pull a report if that's needed. So Tuesday mentions that the dropdown does not look the same. That means your IT office is maybe missing completing steps with patches. So you might want to get with that. You take this document to them, get with them, and make sure that any patch they've had that deals with PHIN has been completed at your college, and that the information in this document should match what you have in your colleague environment. The DNU today is not going to go away in colleague. So I mentioned that earlier, so you may have missed that part. You can't get rid of a code once it's in there, at least you should not, because that could impact previous student or people data, person data. So we would leave the old stuff for now. However, it's not Brian's decision about what happens to North Carolina ERP moving forward, but I just am fairly comfortable or certain that at some point in the not too distant future, we'll be in a Banner environment and no longer in colleague. So we'll be doing this differently in the future, in just a different place and a different system. And when that happens, we would then not bring over the DNU stuff. We'd only bring over the currently approved stuff. But for now in colleague, the DNU would have to stay. But yes, we should, Tuesday, you should have your system administrator take a look at that document, make sure the disabilities and accommodations are up to date. What does the report system office pulling look like? Can we see it? The only thing that I know is, so they do pull daily data. I don't know exactly, there's not really a good way to see that. You could check with your IR person and they have access to something called, well, they have the data warehouse is what they have. Can't remember the term. I think it's business objects is the term that they call it. And they can access the data that is pulled the same way our system office research folk can access that data. So you might be able to get an idea of what is available by talking to your IR, IE person, and they can get into that business objects option. See what else? Do do this only once. We update each semester. And I assume, Linda, when you say update each semester, you probably have a process where you have the student come to you and, because you've got different instructors that the students have to, they get this information to the instructors as far as accommodations as they move throughout different semesters. As far as I know, as long as nothing's changed, it wouldn't get updated in colleague, though. It would just be your internal process to make sure that the student's following through. Is that your understanding, Trudy?
Yes.
Yeah.
As long as there's no changes, just leave it, because remember, you're not going to put a closing date on anything. So it should be active. And also, I've always said this, and Sonia also mentioned this when we've done webinars in the past on Fin. If you haven't started using Fin, which you should be doing, like if you're brand new and you just are hearing about this now, you don't need to go back 10 years. Okay, we're not trying to make more work for you. Just go do your caseload. Who's on your caseload currently right now? Because you wouldn't know all that information if you just started in your position. So don't worry about that. We'll just go forward now.
Yeah. And then to answer Barbara's question about your own report, there's not a colleague delivered report that you can pull, that you just run another screen to pull this information. But every college gets Informer. Informer is a tool that connects to your colleague that you can be used to create and pull reports. So you can talk with your IT office about creating an Informer report for you that would pull this kind of information if you want. If you have access to Informer, then you might know how to do that. But usually at most colleges, you'd have to go through like an IRIE person, or sometimes your system administrator, your IT office, to create a report in Informer. Or it could be another tool too. The Informer is the one that the system office provides all 58 as a reporting tool. Serena, has the issue with data not being visible from specific institutions been resolved? I don't think so, Serena. So I think for you, I'm waiting on, you gave me the name. Is it Tina? I need from her, I gave her a select statement to take a quick look and count some records for me. I just want to make sure, and it's kind of like the Informer thing. It's just a little bit different. It's just very generic and easy for her to do, should be, just to run that select statement so we can count the records. If we see a number of records that make sense to you, then my next step is to, as I mentioned earlier to Dr. Hughes, I need to get with our developer and see what's called the Comprehensive Curriculum Student Report, which is the report that usually registrars submit at the end of each semester, what it's pulling and what it's not pulling. So that's also how I'll find out about the question earlier about the multiple disabilities, if that's needs to be in the first line or if it doesn't matter if that's there or not, from our developer. Trina, thank you, Serena. Jesse, no, you do not need to use the report field. Yeah, thank you. Shalisha, sorry if I mispronounced that, for answering that for us. Any other questions? If you ever do have a question, you can either email me. I guess I should put my email in the chat. I hate our long ncommunitycolleges.edu email. I always spell it wrong. Or even better yet, if it's a colleague related question, we really ask if it's anything related to colleague that you use this get help in the service portal. And then the program, there are lots of teams here, but the one that you would want to use always for student related things is the student programs and services team. Anything that's related to a student typically would be here. You go there, you just put in some information, click submit, and it goes directly to us. And if I see it, and which I do check this stuff like all the time, I'll probably respond faster than you want me to. I'll probably bug you about getting back to me to make sure that you're good to go. You're like, I just submitted it, Brian. Leave me alone. I've got other work to do. But now we just want to make sure that we get you what you need as quickly as possible, so you don't have to worry about that because you got more important stuff to work on.
Brian, Deanna just posted
Yeah.
a question above you.
It's been for all of our students that receive accommodations, but a few months ago, I was contacted by our director of academic compliance quality stating that someone from the system office said the data was not showing up and showed few students and asked disability services using this in colleague. What am I missing? And again, it could be some sort of disconnect that Serena was talking about before between what we think is getting reported on that CCSR and what really is. And that's what I need to kind of, you still should put the data in here. As Dr. Hughes mentioned, that's still a requirement, but it seems like there might be some disconnect that we're currently investigating. It gets pulled in two different ways. There's some data in the nightly feeds. There's a process that is set up with all your colleges where certain student data, including this kind of data, gets pulled on a daily basis. There's also a report that your registrars run that is supposed to pull some of this information. And so I think with that report, there's the potential that there's something not getting picked up that should be. Or some cases, the students or staff are adding this end date and they should not. That could be another reason why. So there's a little bit more investigation. Continue to do it, but we might, if we find a problem, then what'll happen is the IT office at the system office will send out your system administrators a patch to fix that moving forward. Yes, colleague, these are multi, whenever you see a 1, 2, 3, so forth and so on in colleague, those are multi-valued fields. So like I go to emergency information, hospital preference. That's one field. I can't add multiple hospital preferences. It's just one option. But whenever there's a 1, 2, and so forth, that's multi-valued, and you can add, there might be a limit, but probably not a limit to that would impact you all. You could add as many things as you want. So even though you see 1, 2 here, I added ADHD, I'll add autism, and now it looks like I'm full, but really up here in the upper left, there's this little navigation tool. I can go to the next page or the last page, and now I have lines 3 and 4. So I'll add blindness, deaf, just going down the list here, deaf and blind. I probably would add both those. You know, I could keep going and going. It's not going to restrict me to just the 2 lines you see or the 4 lines you see here. You can always use this navigation to add additional disabilities or accommodations. Yep. Thank you. It doesn't matter what department you put yourself in. Student services is fine, Heather. For ServiceNow, if you don't have one that makes sense to you all, just student services are probably the default for anyone else, even if that's not truly your department based on your org chart at your college.
No, it's giving me an invalid reference. And
oh, it is. Forward. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's not that I'm confused.
I'm sorry. It's confused. So there's an email. I can't get to it. When you go back to your login, there's a having trouble logging in button. If you click on that, it lets you send an email to the group that's over ServiceNow at the system office. I'm not the one that is over this. I just use it. And they can help you with that, trying to get that account set up and with that issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Heather, mine did that too. This is Tuesday. There is a little looking glass for the college and the department on the right-hand side of the drop down. If you click that, it'll give you options instead of you typing in the department.
So it's trying to validate it, but it doesn't like the typing. Thank you, Tuesday. How do you get to the next page for accommodation? Same thing. If I really used all 4, I'm just going to put 4 in here randomly. Once I get through the number 4, then it'll give me this navigation tool up here. I can move to the next page. Now I've got 5, 6, 7, 8, and so forth and so on. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Did it answer some questions that you had, or did we tell you something that you didn't already know that now you do know? Yeah, Shalisha.
Yeah, I have a question about accessing the page that you're on
Yes.
because I'm in the system, but I can't find it. I have a
So-
hard copy of exactly what, not the Fin screen, but
Okay.
the catalog.
This.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a few ways to do it, but my favorite way is just if you're in ServiceNow and I just type the word disabilities and hit enter or click search. For me, it's the first thing that pops up. Is it the first thing that pops up for
It's
you
giving
all?
me no results. But I don't think I'm in the right thing. So what's the address? Because it says service now, but for some reason it's just sending me straight to Sandhills. It's not sending me to the system office. part of it.
Okay. So it should be this. Maybe because you use it Sandhills as well.
I guess so.
This is the URL I just put in the chat is what I always give to colleges.
Okay. Thank
So
you. Let me see if that
That's the
works.
URL that I would say that you would need. Now, some colleges do use ServiceNow as well to do ServiceNow type things. So I'm always confused when that happens because I never know the best way to direct because I don't have that same kind of access like I do for our account.
Okay, so this one looks like yours. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
So Barbara learned about statuses. And again, I think it's just a matter, Barbara, of I think as Trudy mentioned, just start doing it moving forward with your current caseload. Tuesday, is that a question for me or just someone else in the chat?
I was just trying to help because we also are a
Gotcha.
ServiceNow school, and ours probably, it looks different than what your screen looks like, Brian, because we
Okay.
use it for our maintenance.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I was
Yep.
thinking that her screen looks similar to mine.
gotcha. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I'm just not familiar with it. Yep, Shalisha got it. Anything else? Any other questions? Hearing none.
I'm hearing none too. If there's no questions, you've got Brian's email.
Yep.
Feel free to email him with any questions that you may have. Like I said, just move forward. If you haven't entered any data, just look at your current list, your case list, and go ahead and start entering the data as much as you can. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this discussion today. And Brian, I very much thank you for sharing your expertise on this. And it's been very helpful. So, and if the reports aren't showing up, your data, go to your IT, go to the people that Brian said there might be something that they need to put a new patch or something that's not showing up. So,
And I'll add to that. And I think whenever you have a problem like that, whenever you're like, I'm not sure, you can always email, obviously, but also your IT or you all could open an incident and then it can, that way it's like just like probably at your campuses, your IT office probably has you do something similar with the help desk or something like that. Open one of those incidents to get things started so that people can start taking a look at what's going on. But Serena, I know that we've got the issue that we've talked about before. So you might see an incident come out that I opened for you on your behalf. We'll see. Once we hear back from Trina, then see what she gets. Then we might go down that route next.
right. Well, everybody have a great day. Brian, thank you again for all the information that you provided. It was wonderful. So I will stop my recording right now.